Andrew Ross was dining with his wife Isabella at the most expensive restaurant in Beverly Hills when a 19-year-old boy in mechanic's coveralls approached their table. He had grease-stained hair, blackened fingernails, and a humility that contrasted with the arrogance of the wealthy clientele. With a trembling voice, he asked Andrew if he could repair his Ferrari 488 in exchange for the leftovers from their plates. Isabella burst into laughter, calling security. But Andrew was struck by something in the boy's eyes, a hunger that wasn't just for food, but for opportunity. What Andrew didn't know was that this homeless young man was named Marcus Bennett, possessed a mechanical talent that would revolutionize the automotive industry, and behind his humble appearance hid the most important invention of the century, a hybrid engine capable of reducing fuel consumption by 90%. But most importantly, Andrew didn't know that this hungry kid would become his greatest business rival, the reason for the end of his marriage, and paradoxically, the only person capable of saving him from total bankruptcy when everything would collapse. The rooftop terrace of Spago in Beverly Hills was the perfect stage for displaying wealth without apparent effort. Andrew Ross, 45 years old and owner of a $500 million automotive empire, sat at the best table with his wife Isabella, a former model he had married more for image than love. Their red Ferrari 488 was strategically parked in front of the restaurant, a symbol of power that attracted envious glances and social media photos. Andrew had built his fortune in the 2000s buying and reselling luxury cars, then expanding into customizing supercars for bored billionaires. Ross Motors had become synonymous with exclusivity and astronomical prices, with a 2-year waiting list for their custom creations. But behind the apparent success, Andrew hid an uncomfortable truth. He had never truly understood cars. He was a born businessman, not a motor enthusiast. Isabella was photographing her oyster dish when a shadow fell across their table. A thin boy, about 5 feet 7 inches tall, wearing worn blue mechanic's coveralls stained with motor oil. His brown hair was disheveled, his hands dirty, but with long, precise fingers of someone who works with millimetric delicacy. Around 20 years old, he had a face that hunger and street life had made more mature than his chronological age. The boy stopped 3 feet from the table, nervously turning a worn cap in his hands. Other customers began looking with disapproval, while restaurant staff quickly moved toward them to remove what they considered a disturber. But before anyone could intervene, the young man found the courage to speak. His voice was low, respectful, but firm. He apologized for the disturbance, introduced himself as Marcus Bennett, and explained he had noticed the Ferrari parked outside. He was a mechanic, he said, and had seen that the car had a cooling system problem that would soon cause very expensive damage. If they would let him repair it that same evening, in exchange, he would ask only for the leftovers from their plates. Isabella burst into a shrill laugh that drew the attention of the entire restaurant. How dare this bum approach their table? How could he think of touching a $300,000 car? She signaled the waiter to call security immediately, but Andrew raised a hand to stop her, struck by something he had seen in the boy's eyes. It wasn't just desperation he read in those dark eyes. It was competence. It was the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was talking about. Andrew had spent 20 years pretending to understand motors and had developed an instinct to recognize who truly possessed that knowledge. This boy, despite his miserable appearance, emanated the aura of someone who understood machines in a way he had never achieved. Ignoring Isabella's increasingly sharp protests, Andrew decided to test the young man. He asked him to explain exactly what was wrong with the Ferrari. Marcus cautiously approached the car, observed it for 30 seconds without even opening the hood, and then listed with impressive technical precision a series of problems Andrew had never noticed. Overheating of the right radiator, minimal leak in the oil circuit, misalignment of the intake system reducing performance by 15%. When Marcus also mentioned a specific factory defect of the 488 model that had caused a Ferrari recall only 6 months earlier, Andrew realized he was facing someone special. This boy wasn't improvising. He knew these cars better than many specialized technicians he paid thousands of dollars a month. The decision was instantaneous and against all social logic. Andrew told Marcus to wait after dinner, that he would let him test his theories. Isabella looked at him as if he had gone mad, threatening to leave if he really allowed that vagrant to touch their car. But Andrew had an instinct for business that had never betrayed him, and that instinct was screaming that he was about to make the most important encounter of his life. 2 hours later, in the dim light of the restaurant parking lot, Andrew and Isabella watched Marcus work under the Ferrari's hood with tools he had pulled from a worn backpack. His movements were those of a surgeon, precise and confident. In 40 minutes he solved all the problems he had diagnosed, plus some he hadn't even mentioned. When he started the engine, the sound was completely different, smoother, more powerful, almost melodious. Isabella was forced to admit the car had never run so well. Andrew remained silent, but his businessman's mind was already calculating the possibilities. This boy had a talent worth a fortune, and apparently lived on the street, with no one recognizing it. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, or the biggest trap he had ever encountered. When Marcus finished the work, he cleaned his hands with a rag and walked away without asking for anything, satisfied with the leftovers Andrew had brought him from the restaurant. But Andrew stopped him before he disappeared into the Los Angeles night. He gave him his business card and told him to show up Monday morning at Ross Motors. He had an offer that would change both their lives. Marcus took the card with slightly trembling hands, not from fear, but from the emotion of someone who finally sees a possibility after months of nothing. He didn't know he was about to enter a world that would elevate him to the heights of success, but would also test every fiber of his moral integrity. And Andrew didn't know that this hungry young mechanic possessed not only extraordinary talent, but also an ambition that would one day eclipse his own. Monday morning, Marcus showed up at Ross Motors with the same coveralls from the weekend, washed but still stained, and a backpack containing everything he owned in the world. The building in downtown LA was a temple of automotive luxury. Immense glass windows, black marble floors, and a collection of supercars worth more than some nation's GDP. Employees looked at him with curiosity mixed with contempt, wondering what a bum was doing in that sanctuary of wealth. Andrew welcomed him personally, ignoring the whispered comments from his staff. He had spent the weekend thinking about that boy, and the more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that he had found a rough diamond he could transform into gold. He led him to the main workshop, where 3 Ferraris worth $1 million each awaited custom modifications for billionaire clients. What happened in the following hours changed Andrew's perception of the automotive business. Marcus approached the first Ferrari, a 2020 LaFerrari, and in 5 minutes of inspection identified 7 possible improvements that would increase performance by 20%. He didn't limit himself to pointing out problems, but explained with impressive technical competence how to solve them, using language that mixed practical experience and deep theoretical knowledge. It was clear he had studied, but had also spent years with his hands in engines. Andrew's head mechanic, a 40-year veteran who had worked on supercars since they were invented, was left speechless when Marcus began working on the second car. The boy dismantled the intake system with speed and precision he had never seen, reassembled everything in half the normal time, and when they started the engine, the sound was completely transformed. It had gone from a powerful but rough roar to a mechanical symphony that gave goosebumps. But the moment that definitively convinced Andrew came when Marcus approached the third Ferrari, a 488 Pista that the customer had brought back for the 5th time, complaining of unsatisfactory performance. 3 specialized mechanics had worked on it for weeks, without solving the problem. Marcus observed it for 10 minutes, then asked if he could open the hood. In half an hour, he found a microscopic defect in a component that cost $5, but was limiting the entire car's performance. It wasn't just technical competence that impressed Andrew, it was Marcus's approach to work. He treated each car as if it were a living being, caressing components before installing them, speaking softly to engines while adjusting them. He had that type of authentic passion that no amount of money can buy. The same passion Andrew had lost long ago in the ruthless business world. During lunch break, Andrew brought Marcus to his panoramic office and began asking questions about his story. Marcus told of growing up in a Detroit orphanage, learning mechanics, helping in a small garage in exchange for a place to sleep, studying mechanical engineering self-taught, using books found in used markets. He had ended up on the street when the garage closed due to economic crisis, and for 6 months had been surviving with small repair jobs. But what most struck Andrew was when Marcus pulled from his backpack a series of drawings and calculations written by hand on recycled paper. They were projects for innovative motor modifications, ideas that demonstrated an understanding of automotive engineering beyond many college-educated engineers. One in particular caught Andrew's attention: the project for a revolutionary hybrid system that could reduce fuel consumption by 70%.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
While maintaining superior performance, Andrew immediately understood the commercial value of those ideas. If even one of those innovations were patented and implemented, it could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And Marcus was showing them candidly, without realizing he was revealing secrets that could change the global automotive industry. The proposal Andrew made to Marcus that afternoon was apparently generous. A work contract as head mechanic with a $100,000 annual salary, a company apartment, and the possibility to work on Ross Motors' most exclusive projects. In exchange, all projects and innovations developed by Marcus would become exclusive property of the company. Marcus accepted immediately, too grateful for the opportunity to carefully read the contract details he was signing. In the following days, Marcus transformed from street kid to rising star of the Milan automotive world. His innovations began being applied to Ross Motors' custom cars, and customers were so impressed by the improvements that Andrew managed to double his service prices. Marcus's name began circulating in exclusive circles, though always as the genius who works for Andrew Ross, never as an autonomous personality. But as success grew, something began changing in the relationship between Andrew and Marcus. The young mechanic realized his ideas were worth much more than he was receiving, and began asking questions about patents and profits. Andrew, for his part, began seeing Marcus not as a protege to help, but as a potential threat to his dominant position. The seed of future conflict had been planted, though neither realized it yet. Isabella, who initially had despised Marcus, began noticing him differently when she saw him transformed by new clothes and the confidence that success had given him. The street kid was becoming an attractive man, and this didn't escape the always attentive eyes of a woman accustomed to calculating people's value. This too would become an explosive element in the dynamic that was forming. The honeymoon phase between Andrew and Marcus lasted exactly 6 months. Then began the complications that would transform a story of social redemption into a ruthless war between two men representing two different ways of understanding success, ambition, and the price one is willing to pay to realize one's dreams. Within the first year, Marcus had transformed Ross Motors from luxury dealership to innovation laboratory, with profits grown 200%. But the turning point came when he discovered Andrew had patented all his inventions without mentioning him, selling the revolutionary hybrid system to Tesla for $50 million. Andrew justified everything citing the contract, but Marcus understood the difference between legality and morality. He began working secretly on his most innovative ideas, preparing future independence. Isabella, attracted to the authentic passion Marcus had maintained, began frequenting the workshop with growing interest. The emotional triangle exploded during a company party where Andrew took all credit for Marcus's innovations, presenting him only as the skillful mechanic who realizes my ideas. That night, Isabella followed Marcus to the parking lot, and for the first time they talked about their dreams and the price they were paying to stay in Andrew's world. In the following months, Marcus secretly developed his most revolutionary project, an electric motor with energy storage technology superior to any existing thermal engine. Isabella had become his accomplice, providing information about clients and real profit margins, in love with the integrity that contrasted with her world's cynicism. When Andrew discovered through a private detective the relationship between his wife and Marcus, the confrontation was brutal. He fired Marcus, accusing him of stealing both wife and ideas, threatening legal destruction if he used the knowledge acquired. Marcus left the company, deleting all files from the system and taking away the tools he had designed. Isabella followed him 2 days later, leaving Andrew with a letter explaining the difference between possessing someone and truly loving them. Marcus and Isabella started a new life in a small workshop on the outskirts of Los Angeles, funding their research by selling the jewelry and luxury items Isabella had accumulated during marriage. The first months were harsh. Marcus worked 18 hours a day on his revolutionary motor, while Isabella learned to manage the commercial aspects of the nascent business, discovering a natural talent for negotiations she didn't know she possessed. Andrew, left alone, saw his company begin declining rapidly. Without Marcus's innovations, Ross Motors returned to being a simple luxury dealership in an increasingly competitive market. Customers began complaining about quality decline. The best mechanics quit to follow Marcus, and competitors began eroding market shares with more advanced products. The final blow came when Marcus publicly presented his revolutionary electric motor, attracting $500 million in investment from an international consortium. His new company, Bennett Innovations, became overnight the hottest name in the global automotive sector, while Ross Motors slipped toward irrelevance and bankruptcy. But Marcus's revenge wasn't limited to professional success. He systematically began stealing customers from Andrew, offering superior technologies at competitive prices, and using his reputation as an innovation genius to build partnerships Andrew couldn't even dream of. Within 2 years, the roles had completely reversed. Marcus had become the undisputed king of luxury automotive, while Andrew struggled to avoid bankruptcy. 5 years after that first night at the restaurant, Andrew Ross found himself in the same situation he had found Marcus. Without money, without prospects, with a company on the verge of bankruptcy and a destroyed reputation. Life's irony led him to knock on Bennett Innovations' door, not seeking revenge, but seeking salvation. Marcus received him in his panoramic office, the one that had once been Andrew's. He had become a successful 40-year-old man, but had maintained the humility and passion that had always characterized him. Isabella was at his side, no longer as a trophy wife, but as a business partner and life companion, co-founder of a company that had revolutionized the global automotive industry. The conversation was surprisingly cordial. Andrew admitted his mistakes, acknowledged having exploited Marcus, and asked not for pity, but for a second chance. He wanted to work for Bennett Innovations, put his business experience at the service of someone who had the technical vision he had always lacked. He was willing to start from the bottom, prove himself with facts instead of words. Marcus and Isabella consulted privately before giving an answer. They could easily let Andrew face the consequences of his actions, but realized that true victory wasn't in revenge, but in the possibility of creating something greater than themselves. They decided to offer Andrew a position in their company, not out of generosity, but because they recognized that his past mistakes didn't cancel his entrepreneurial skills. The story's epilogue occurred 10 years later, during the awards ceremony where Marcus received international recognition for automotive innovation. On stage together, climbed Marcus, Isabella, and Andrew, the trio that had transformed a small startup into a global colossus, producing the world's most advanced automobiles. Each had found their role. Marcus as technical genius, Isabella as commercial strategist, Andrew as business veteran, teaching young engineers how to transform ideas into sustainable success. In the audience were hundreds of people who had worked for them over the years, many of whom had been like Marcus, talented young people who only needed an opportunity to prove their worth. Bennett Innovations had become famous not only for its technical innovations, but for its policy of hiring and developing talent regardless of social or economic background. During his acceptance speech, Marcus told the story of that night at the restaurant when he had asked for leftovers in exchange for repairing a Ferrari. He told how pride and greed had almost destroyed 3 lives, and how forgiveness and collaboration had instead transformed them into something extraordinary. His conclusion was simple but profound. True success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you build together with others. That evening, dining together on the terrace of the same restaurant where everything began, Marcus, Isabella, and Andrew toasted not to the success they had achieved, but to the lessons they had learned along the way. They had discovered that ruthless competition destroys, while authentic collaboration creates lasting value, that humility is worth more than pride, and that sometimes second chances are the most precious gift we can give ourselves and others. Their story became legend in the American business world, not as an example of successful revenge, but as demonstration that even the bitterest conflicts can transform into fruitful collaborations when the people involved decide to grow beyond their past mistakes. And the homeless boy who had asked for leftovers had become the man who nourished thousands of people's dreams, proving that true talent knows no social barriers and that opportunity, when it meets preparation, can truly change the world. Like if you believe true talent knows no social barriers. Comment which moment of the story struck you most. Share to inspire those fighting to have their worth recognized. Subscribe for more stories of redemption, ambition, and second chances. Sometimes those who ask for leftovers possess the recipes of the future. Sometimes humility opens more doors than arrogance. And sometimes the best revenge is success, built with your own hands. Because true power isn't in possessing, but in creating value for others.